Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. And now it's my turn. Do you definitely want to know? I ask you that because once we cross this threshold, there's no going back. My story isn't pretty or polished, but I can't pretend anymore. I'm done trying to hold up the facade of a stable, suburban life. I'm done swallowing every bitter word. From now on, I'm speaking plainly, if only to keep myself from unraveling completely. I remember the night it all cracked open. It wasn't sudden or explosive. It was quiet. And that was the worst part of it. The silence. The kind that seeps in around 2 a.m. when the world sleeps, and you realize the house you live in is no longer a home. You sense a coldness under the same roof that once kept you safe. That's how it began for me anyway. Amy had been slipping out more often. She'd say, "I'm just running out to the store," or "I'm meeting a friend for coffee," or the one that burned the deepest, "He's helping me learn to dry stick." That last one was always accompanied by a wry, dismissive shrug. Dan, the friend, the mechanic, the driving instructor. At first, I didn't let it eat at me. She'd grown up in Florida, where automatic transmissions were the norm, so learning stick shift wasn't outlandish. But the more she disappeared, the heavier the air grew in our living room. The more calls she got that she never answered in front of me. The more cold dinners we shared, side by side but miles apart. I can't pinpoint the exact moment suspicion hardened into certainty. Maybe it was the day I came home early from work and found her on the phone in our bedroom, voice hushed, lips trembling with excitement she tried to hide. Or maybe it was that look in her eyes when she said Dan's name, like a glow I hadn't seen in years. I realize I sound bitter. Maybe I am. But I want to show you the truth of it. This is the truth of a man who feels his entire life, his marriage, his sense of fatherhood, was built on a rotting foundation. I poured myself into the small details, the fragments, the conversations I overheard, the subtle shift in her perfume choice, the sudden purchase of lacy undergarments that didn't seem meant for me. And then came the phone call, the one I recorded, the one that cut straight through me when I played it back later, alone in the dead of night. Amy's voice, trembling just enough for me to hear the guilt she thought she was hiding. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. I held my breath, let the silence speak for me. If she wanted me to scream, I wouldn't. If she wanted me to demand an explanation, I'd deny her that satisfaction. But let me rewind a bit, show you something from before everything fell apart. It's a memory, years ago, shortly after we moved to this Chicago suburb. We had a patch of grass behind the house, just big enough for a barbecue and a couple of chairs. That first summer, Amy and I grilled burgers, had neighbors over, talked about our hopes for the future. She was wearing a sundress with little flowers on it. I'd catch her eye, and we'd share a smile that felt like it could hold forever in it. That memory keeps replaying in my head now, like a cruel trick, a reminder of what once was, of that carefree softness, and how quickly it can vanish. A month ago, I was still trying to salvage things. I suggested we take a weekend trip, get out of the city, find a lakeside cabin like we used to. She said yes, but I saw the hesitation in her eyes. That hesitation told me I was no longer her priority. She was already gone. Her mind, her heart, her warmth, some piece of her had drifted far beyond my reach. 2 weeks ago, I got the DNA test results. You can guess the conclusion. My boy, who I'd believed was mine for the better part of a year, was Dan's son. No margin of error to cling to. No chance that the lab messed up. Even the name on the form seemed to mock me. Ray Harrison. Tested alleged father. Negative. I'd had my suspicions when the timeline didn't add up, when I saw the child's features growing. I convinced myself I was paranoid, but now I knew. My father used to say, "A man isn't measured by the problems he faces, but by how he faces them." That phrase replayed in my mind, though it didn't bring any comfort. I confronted Amy the night I found out. "So it's true?" I asked, standing in the bedroom doorway, arms folded. She was on the bed, rummaging through her purse for something she never found. I remember the flicker of fear in her eyes when she finally looked at me. She swallowed hard, her voice faltering. "Ray, just listen." "No. I've listened enough." My voice was low, heavy. "I know he's not mine." She froze, hand trembling around some lipstick tube. Slowly, she set it aside. I didn't want you to find out this way." I held her gaze, refused to look away even though everything inside me was crumbling. Then how should I have found out, Amy? Over a cheerful breakfast, a greeting card that says, "By the way, the kid's not yours." She flinched. Maybe it was my tone, or maybe it was the finality in my eyes. She started to speak again, but I walked out, shutting the door behind me. Not with a slam, just a quiet click. That was all the anger I let myself show then. A silent kind of rage that threatened to crush my chest from the inside. I spent that night in the living room, staring at the blank TV screen, replaying every moment of our marriage. The day we met in college, her laughter at a baseball game, the time we painted our new home. Memories swirled until I felt sick. The next morning, I left for work as if nothing had changed, because the only power I had left, it seemed, was to not acknowledge her carefully orchestrated betrayal. I wouldn't feed her guilt with my outburst. If she wanted to see me break, I wouldn't give her the pleasure. But not seeing me break wasn't quite enough to stop what was already in motion. Dan was stepping deeper into her life, and she wasn't shy about it anymore. "I'm meeting Dan to practice," she said one evening, keys jingling in her hand, her eyes refusing to meet mine. Practice. Right, more like practice pressing her body against his, practice exchanging secrets that belonged to me once. I was done trying to fool myself. The truth was right there, his presence overshadowing our lives, creeping into every room, even though he never set foot in this house when I was around. I was at my wit's end by the time I decided to follow her, which was probably about a week later. She left around 6, wearing a fitted top and a skirt that was a little too short for just driving lessons. I waited a few minutes, then eased out of the house in my own car. It wasn't difficult to trail her. She drove with a kind of anxious excitement, as though anticipating something that made her heart pound. She turned into a small parking lot behind a strip of closed stores. And there he was, Dan, leaning against a classic Mustang, engine idling, that confident grin plastered across his face. I parked at a distance, heart hammering so loud I thought I'd break my steering wheel. They talked for a moment, and then he slid into the driver's seat while she hopped in the passenger side. The car roared to life, and I tailed them. After a few blocks, they pulled into a secluded area near an abandoned warehouse. It was quiet, barely any traffic, good for learning to drive stick, I guess. My mouth went dry. I saw them laughing through the windshield. She scooted closer to him, her hand on his arm. My stomach twisted. This was it. The moment. A second later, she leaned in, and they kissed. The heat between them was undeniable. She stretched her arms around his neck, and he pulled her closer until their bodies molded together over the console. They were lost in the moment, an erotic tension so blatant that even from where I sat, hidden by the darkness, I could feel it. It was a betrayal in living color, stinging my eyes. Time froze. I should have pulled away, should have saved myself the sight of her fingers tangling in his hair, of his hands drifting to her thighs, as she gave a soft gasp. But I couldn't tear my gaze away. I needed to see. I needed to feel the full force of what she was doing. The reality of it, raw and brutal. Eventually, she broke the kiss. She looked around, probably to see if anyone was watching, but I stayed in the shadows. I watched as they switched seats. She was in the driver's seat now, but her hand lingered on his thigh, and they exchanged a laugh I'd never heard her give me anymore. That's when something inside me snapped, or maybe it just turned ice cold. I drove off, leaving them to their stolen moment. The ache in my chest was so strong I thought it might kill me. Back home, I locked myself in our bedroom. I stared into the mirror. The reflection looked like a stranger. I could see the lines of stress carved into my face, the exhausted droop of my eyes, the defeat that radiated from me. I took a breath, then another, but the oxygen felt thin. For the first time, it dawned on me. If she wanted him, maybe that was her choice. Maybe this was a war I'd already lost. But the gnawing sense of humiliation, of not being enough, was a beast that refused to let me sleep. Do you know what it's like to suspect your entire life has been a lie? That every "I love you," every little intimate moment, could have been overshadowed by something else, someone else. It's a bruise that never stops throbbing. Even in your quiet moments, it's there, reminding you that the foundation of your marriage was paper thin, easily torn by a younger man with a confident smile and a better sense of adventure. I thought about revenge in those days, but I wasn't even sure what revenge would look like. A dramatic confrontation, a public humiliation. That's not my style. I'm not the type to pick fights in parking lots or wave guns around. The only weapon I had was my silence, and an unwavering determination to face them with a calmness that might unnerve them. I suspect that was the last thing Amy wanted. She wanted me to blow up, to demand why, to cry or shout, so she could paint me as the unhinged husband. But I just sat there at dinner the next night, silent, swirling the food on my plate. "Ray," she said finally, her voice uncertain, "this is getting ridiculous." I looked at her, took in her face, so familiar yet so distant. "Is it?" I asked quietly. She set her fork down. The clink against the plate echoed in the stillness. "Yes, just. Can we talk?" I studied her. My fingers clenched the edge of the table. "I'm all out of words." She lowered her gaze. "Then listen." "Ray, But I stood up before she could finish. My appetite was gone. I walked out of the dining room, and behind me, I heard a muffled sob she tried to swallow. Another memory struck me. Years ago, when we argued about finances, she cried afterward in the bathroom, and I found her to comfort her. This time, I didn't rush to comfort her. I felt nothing but that hollow place inside me, like a second skeleton that pressed my real bones into submission. People say heartbreak either softens you or hardens you. I think it does both in waves. Some nights, I'd bury my face in my hands and wonder if I'd ever feel normal again. Other nights, I'd grit my teeth, determined never to let her see the shattered man behind my eyes. Each day blurred into the next. Work was routine. Coworkers asked if something was wrong, but I just forced a half smile and shrugged. Tired. I'd say, didn't sleep well. The day came when Amy decided she couldn't take the silence anymore. She confronted me in the living room, her arms crossed over her chest, while the late afternoon sunlight etched lines across her face. "We can't keep going like this," she said, "pretending nothing's happening. We need to discuss everything." My jaw tightened. "Then speak. I'm listening." She inhaled shakily. "I was lonely. I felt. I don't know. You seemed distant for so long, and I needed something that made me feel alive." Dan was exciting. He reminded me I wasn't just a wife stuck in a routine. A tear slipped down her cheek. I never meant for it to go this far. I stared at her, noticing how her shoulders trembled. "You never meant for it to go this far, or you never thought you'd get caught." She closed her eyes, tears falling onto her blouse. "Ray, I'm sorry. I know you probably hate me now." In that moment, part of me wanted to tell her I did hate her, that she ruined everything. But the words wouldn't come. My voice emerged as a cracked whisper. I wish it could have been different. She stepped toward me, maybe to hug me, maybe to beg for forgiveness. I stepped back, out of reach. A flicker of pain flashed in her eyes. But what did she expect? That I'd just hold her and pretend the last few months never happened. She wanted absolution without facing the guilt. I wouldn't give her that. Not now. I left the house, spent the rest of the day driving aimlessly, passing through highways and side streets. My mind was a carousel of memories, flipping between the day I proposed on a quiet pier and the day I realized she had given herself to someone else. I remembered the look on her face when she told me she was pregnant, how I'd knelt in front of her, pressed my palm against her stomach, tears in my eyes, thinking it was my child. A savage bitterness welled up inside me. It was a betrayal of the deepest sort. That night, I slept in a motel, ignoring her calls. When I finally returned home the next morning, I found the place quiet. She was in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee gone cold. I dropped my keys on the counter and headed straight for the shower, feeling her eyes on my back the entire time but refusing to acknowledge her presence. The days wore on like that. Each morning, I'd wake up to a woman who had my last name but not my trust. Each evening, I'd collapse into bed in the spare room, mind racing yet body exhausted. Then, one evening, she did something surprising. She asked me to meet Dan face to face, to talk. "He wants to make things right," she said, as if that sentence even made sense. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Make things right by what? Telling me how much he loves my wife, how he fathered the child I thought was mine. And yet, like a moth to a flame, I agreed. Maybe I was chasing closure, or maybe I wanted to look him in the eye and see the man who shattered my world. We met at a local diner, plain, off the highway, with neon signs flickering outside. Amy sat between us in the booth, like a mediator, or maybe the rope in a tug-of-war. Dan was younger, a bit more energetic in his posture. He tried to look remorseful, but there was a spark in his eyes, a confidence. In that moment, I hated him more than I've ever hated anyone. "Ray," he said, speaking softly, I never set out to hurt you. This thing with Amy it just happened. We connected over cars and—" "Stop." I raised a hand. "Don't talk to me about your connection. You think I care about how it started." My voice was low, each word precise. He swallowed, glancing at Amy, who looked like a deer in headlights. "I'm sorry, man. Truly." I bit back a mocking laugh. "You're sorry? Great. Does that fix anything?" He didn't answer. Silence settled at the table, thick as smoke. Eventually he managed, "Look, I never wanted to destroy your marriage. Amy told me she was unhappy." My hands curled into fists under the table. "Unhappy? Yeah, I got that memo. So let's see, you eased her unhappiness by sleeping with her, fathering a child, and letting me believe it was mine." My voice shook, but I kept it controlled. "You're a real saint, Dan." He winced. "I know you have every right to hate me." Amy leaned forward, her eyes hollow. "This isn't helping." I shifted my gaze to her. "What did you expect? Civil small talk about the weather?" I forced myself to stay calm. "If you thought I'd be polite to the man who took my wife and my child, you don't know me at all." Amy bowed her head, tears glistening on her lashes. Dan opened his mouth but couldn't seem to find any words that would rectify the situation. Eventually, we sat in silence that stretched so long I could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. I snapped first, sliding out of the booth. I left some money on the table for the coffees we hadn't even touched. "You both wanted me to talk. Well, you got your talk. It's done." With that, I walked out. I half expected Dan to follow me, maybe start a fight in the parking lot. But he didn't. I think even he understood that stepping too close to me in that moment would be tempting fate. I drove home, ignoring the ping of messages from Amy's phone. My mind was set on one thing. I had to find a way out of this twisted triangle. Because that's what it was now. A triangle with no comfortable corners. No matter how we tried to rearrange ourselves, the angles wouldn't line up without someone getting cut. And I was done bleeding. Let me shift you to a different memory. My father's funeral. That was 4 years ago. The day was overcast, the air heavy with that Midwest humidity that clings to your skin. I recall standing by his casket, feeling numb, hearing the mechanical hum of the funeral home's air conditioning. Everyone around me offered condolences, but they all blurred together. I was left with one question. Who am I now that he's gone? That question echoes again in the present. Who am I now that everything I built is in pieces? Amy started pushing for a conversation about the future. As though we had one. We can't just live under the same roof without talking, she insisted one evening, cornering me when I tried to head to my room. I turned slowly to face her. I have nothing left to say. She looked desperate. I know you're hurting. You think you're the only one who knows how I feel. My voice had a growl to it. You tore my life apart. You took my fatherhood from me. You think some heartful chat is going to patch that up? Her lips trembled. I know I can't fix this, but at least let me try to explain. Explain what? That you were bored. That you needed excitement. That you found it in some younger guy who fixes cars. My anger had nowhere to go but outward. I'm done, Amy. Done trying to decipher your reasons. You made your choice. She stepped back, letting out a soft sob. But she didn't chase me as I left. Maybe she finally understood my fury. Maybe she realized I was a powder keg about to explode. I retreated into days of near silence. Went to work, came back, ate minimal meals, drank whiskey in the dark. The phone call I recorded, her apology, still sat on my phone, like an artifact of betrayal. Sometimes I played it back, not to torment myself, but to remind me why I had to see this through to the bitter end. The ring of her voice, that tremor in her breath, it fueled my resolve. A few days later, Dan tried to talk to me again. He showed up at my workplace, of all places. My colleagues gave me questioning looks as I stepped outside to meet him in the parking lot. He stood by his truck, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. What do you want? I asked, cold as ice. He shifted on his feet. I don't want this bad blood between us. I gave a hollow laugh. Bad blood? That's an understatement. He rubbed the back of his neck. Amy's been a wreck. I don't want to see her this way. I wanted to see if we could find a way to what, Dan? Shake hands. Grab a beer. Talk about fatherhood tips. He flinched. Look, I respect that you're angry. You have every reason. No, I cut him off. You don't get to talk about reasons. You don't get to stand here and act like this is some minor conflict we can resolve over friendly negotiation. You stole my wife. You impregnated her. That's not something I can just put behind me. He bowed his head, eyes on the asphalt. I'm sorry. I studied him for a moment, memorizing every detail. The slight stubble on his jaw, the way his shoulders drooped with guilt. I want you out of my life, I said quietly. Don't come around me again. Before he could respond, I turned and walked back inside. My fists clenched so tightly my nails bit into my palms. As soon as I made it to my office, I realized my heart was pounding, adrenaline raging. It felt like a victory, but it was hollow. There was no satisfaction, no relief, just that endless ache. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. That recurring thought reemerged. Who am I now? The man who lost his wife, who found out his child wasn't truly his. I felt like a ghost haunting the corridors of my own life. The question turned to another. How do I take back control? A quiet voice whispered inside me. Sometimes the only way to truly hurt the people who wronged you is to walk away and never look back. I started making plans. Financial, logistical. I'd vanish. I'd leave behind the marriage, the house, everything. Not because I was weak, but because I saw no reason to stay. The future here was ashes. So, over the next week, I moved systematically, closed joint accounts, stashed money into my personal account, got a new phone that only close friends could reach. I looked into transferring to a branch office out of state. My coworkers were baffled, but I didn't owe them an explanation. Amy tried to corner me one last time. Where have you been? She demanded when I came home late one evening. You're never around. We need to talk about the bills, the mortgage, all of it. I set my briefcase down and met her gaze. "No," I said simply. Her brow furrowed. "No. What does that mean?" I inhaled slowly. "I'm done with this." I started packing my things. Her face fell. "You're leaving?" I nodded. A flicker of something. Panic, regret, maybe heartbreak, crossed her face. "Ray, please, don't do this," she whispered. "We can try counseling or—" I pressed my lips together. "You made a choice, Amy. You chose Dan, whether you realized it or not. And you lied to me about our child. There's no coming back from that for me." Tears brimmed in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you. You did. And now it's my turn to make a choice. I'm choosing me." With that, I brushed past her and headed to the bedroom. Over the next few days, I packed up my clothes, my personal items. The most surreal moment was finding the onesies and baby items we bought, back when we thought I was the father. I shoved them all into a box and left it in the nursery. Let them figure out what to do with it. My conscience was clear. I refused to torture myself by storing memories that didn't belong to me. The final confrontation came on a rainy Saturday morning. I was carrying 2 suitcases to my car when Dan's Mustang rolled up. He stepped out, clutching an umbrella, his eyes flicking from me to the luggage. Amy emerged from the house, arms folded, hair clinging to her face in the drizzle. Dan tried to approach me. "Ray, can we?" I gave him a glare that halted him in his tracks. I said everything I needed to say. "I'm done." Amy's voice shook. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere that isn't here." She took a step forward, raindrops streaking her cheeks like tears. "Please, don't just vanish like this." My eyes locked on hers, searching for any remnant of the woman I once loved. I found only regret and a heartbreak of her own making. "You vanished first," I said quietly, long before I did. Then I slipped into my car, turned on the engine, and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing there, Dan awkwardly placing a hand on her shoulder. The image vanished in the haze of rain. Driving away felt like stepping off a cliff. Terrifying, yet liberating. I had no real plan, no final destination. A few hours later, I checked into a modest motel on the outskirts of town. That evening, I scored the classifieds for a temporary apartment. My phone buzzed with messages, all from Amy. I deleted them unread. Then, in a moment of finality, I played that phone call she'd left on my voicemail days ago. Her tearful, "I'm sorry." I let it soak in one last time before erasing it forever. Some might say that's petty or cruel, but it was my way of cutting the last thread. I spent the following week in a daze. Went to work, typed up my transfer request, got approval shockingly fast, since they needed a branch manager in another state. Maybe it was fate's twisted sense of humor. By Friday, I'd sorted out the details. I'd be relocating to a small town a few states away. New start, new life. That's what I told myself, though the voice in my head remained hollow. It won't fix the pain, just dull it. On my last night in Chicago, I stood on the balcony of my temporary apartment, watching the city lights flicker. I felt that weight in my chest, the pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, but also a calm acceptance. I realized I'd done what I needed to do to survive. Maybe one day, I'd be able to forgive. But not yet. The next morning, I packed my car and headed down the highway, leaving the skyline behind. You might think that's the end of the story, but there's a final beat I need to share. In the weeks that followed, I ignored calls from mutual friends. I blocked Amy, blocked Dan. I even changed my social media. But I did one last thing before severing all ties. I sent her a letter. Short, typed, no return address. It read, "Amy, I hope you find what you're looking for, but I need a chance to find what I lost. You don't have to call or write back. Take care, Ray." That was my revenge, I suppose. To disappear, to leave her with nothing but her own choices, and that child she had with another man. It wasn't a violent revenge, nor was it a triumphant one. It was the only way I could reclaim some part of myself. You see, in the end, vengeance doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with footsteps leading away from the wreckage you never asked for. Sometimes it's just the quiet knowledge that you refuse to be destroyed by someone else's sins. So here I am now, a few months later, telling you my story from a nondescript rented house in a new town. The nights still feel endless, and the sting hasn't fully faded. But I wake up each morning with the choice to keep breathing, to keep moving forward. Who am I now? I'm still figuring that out. But I'm free. Free from the suffocating weight of lies and illusions. Free from the desperate grasp of a marriage long gone. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to start over. I asked you at the beginning, do you definitely want to know? Well, now you know. This is what betrayal looks like when you peek under the floorboards of someone's life. Slow-moving devastation, quiet torment, and a final exodus that barely feels like victory. Yet it's the only ending that fits the story of a man whose entire life turned out to be an illusion. And so I go on, one step at a time, carrying the scars that prove I once believed in something beautiful, until it all burned down. That's it. That's the truth. Take it. Leave it. Judge it. Do what you will. But remember, it could happen to anyone. We never know what we can lose until we're already free-falling, watching the pieces of our life scatter like ashes in the wind. And once that happens, all that's left is to choose how you walk away. I choose to walk away in silence.